Hello, Year 6. So yesterday we found out that the people that worked at Camp Green Lake were trying to pretend that Zero had never been there. So we'll find out what happens today. Now today I'm going to read you 2 chapters because they're quite short. 32 and then straight on to 33. Okay. Chapter 32. 2 days later, a new kid was assigned to Group D. His name was Brian, but X-Ray called him Twitch because he was always fidgeting. Twitch was assigned Zero's bed and Zero's crate. Vacancies didn't last long at Camp Green Lake. Twitch had been arrested for stealing a car. He claimed he could break into a car, disconnect the alarm and hotwire the engine all in less than a minute. I never planned to, steal one, he told them, but sometimes, I'll be walking past a real nice car parked in a deserted area and, I'll just stop twitching. If you think I twitch now, you should see me when I'm around a car. The next thing I know, I'm behind the wheel. Stanley lay on his scratchy sheets. It occurred to him that his cot no longer smelled bad. He wondered if the smell had gone away, or if he'd just gotten used to it. Hey, caveman, said Twitch, do we really have to get up at 4:30? You get used to it, Stanley told him. It's the coolest part of the day. He tried not to think about Zero. It was too late. Either he'd made it to the Big Thumb or... What worried him the most, however, wasn't that it was too late. What worried him the most, what really ate at his insides, was the fear that it wasn't too late. What if Zero was still alive, desperately crawling across the dirt, searching for water? He tried to force the image out of his mind. The next morning, out on the lake, Stanley listened as Mr. Sir told Twitch the requirements for the hole, as wide and as deep as your shovel. Twitch fidgeted. His fingers drummed against the wooden shaft of the shovel and his neck moved from side to side. You won't be twitching so much after digging all day, Mr. Sir told him. You won't have strength to wiggle your pinky. He popped some sunflowers in his mouth, deftly chewed them and spat out the shells. This isn't a Girl Scout camp. The water truck came shortly after sunrise. Stanley got in line, behind Magnet, ahead of Twitch. What if it's not too late? He watched Mr. Sir fill X-Ray's canteen. The image of Zero crawling across the hot, dry dirt remained in his head. But what could he do about it? Even if Zero was somehow alive after more than 4 days, how would Stanley ever find him? It would take days. He'd need a car. Or a pickup truck. A pickup truck with a tank of water in the back. Stanley wondered if Mr. Sir had left the keys in the ignition. He slowly backed away from the line. Then he circled to the other side of the truck. He looked through the window. The keys were dangling in the ignition. Stanley felt his fingers start to twitch. He took a deep breath to steady himself and tried to think clearly. He'd never driven before, but how hard could it be? This is really crazy, he told himself. Whatever he did, he knew he'd have to do it quickly before Mr. Sir noticed. It's too late, he told himself. Zero couldn't have survived. But what if it wasn't too late? He took another deep breath. Think about this, he told himself, but there wasn't time to think. He flung open the door to the truck and climbed quickly inside. Hey! Shouted Mr. Sir. He turned the key and stepped on the gas pedal. The engine revved, but the truck didn't move. He pressed the pedal to the floor. The engine roared, but the truck was motionless. Mr. Sir came running around the side of the truck. The door was still open. Put it in gear! Shouted Twitch. The gear shift was on the floor next to the seat. Stanley pulled the lever back until the arrow pointed to the letter D for drive. The truck lurched forward. Stanley jerked against the seat and tightly gripped the wheel as the truck accelerated. His foot was pressed to the floor. The truck went faster and faster across the dry lake bed. It bounced over a pile of dirt. Suddenly, Stanley was slammed forward, then instantly backward as an airbag exploded in his face. He fell out of the open door and onto the ground. He'd driven straight into a hole. He lay on the dirt, staring at the truck, which stuck lopsided into the ground. He sighed. He couldn't blame his no-good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather this time. This time, it was his own fault 100%. He'd probably just done the stupidest thing he'd ever done in his short, miserable life. He managed to get to his feet. He was sore, but didn't think he'd broken any bones. He glanced back at Mr. Sir, who remained where he was, staring at Stanley. He ran. His canteen was strapped around his neck. It banged against his chest as he ran, and every time it hit against him, it reminded him that it was empty, empty, empty. So straight on to chapter 33. He slowed to a walk. As far as he could tell, nobody was chasing him. He could hear voices coming from back by the truck, but couldn't make out the words. Occasionally he'd hear the revving of the engine, but the truck wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. He headed in what he thought was the direction of the Big Thumb, but he couldn't see it through the haze. Walking helped him calm down, and it allowed him to think clearly. He doubted he could make it to the Big Thumb, and with no water in his canteen, he didn't want to risk his life on the hope that he'd find refuge there. He'd have to return to camp. He knew that, but he was in no hurry. It would be better to return later, after everyone had had a chance to calm down, and as long as he'd come this far, he might as well look for Zero. He decided he would walk as long as he could until he was too weak to go any further, and then he'd turn around and go back. He smiled as he realised that wouldn't quite work. He would only go halfway as far as he thought he could go, so that he'd still have the strength to return. Then he'd have to make a deal with the warden, tell her where he'd found Kate Barlow's lipstick, and beg for mercy. He was surprised by how far out the holes extended. He couldn't even see the camp compound anymore, but he still kept passing holes. Just when he thought he'd passed the last hole, he'd come across another cluster of them, a little further away. Back at the compound, they had dug in a systematic order, row upon row, allowing space for the water truck. But out here there was no system. It was as if every once in a while, in a fit of frustration, the warden would just pick a spot at random and say, "Well, the hell dig here." It was like trying to guess the winning lottery numbers. Stanley found himself looking down into each hole he passed. He didn't admit to himself what he was looking for. After more than an hour had gone by, he thought he'd surely seen the last hole, but then off to the left he saw another cluster of holes. Well, he didn't actually see the holes, he saw the mounds of dirt. He stepped over the mounds and looked into the first hole, and his heart stopped. Down at the bottom was a family of yellow-spotted lizards. Their large red eyes looked up at him. He leapt back over a mound and ran. He didn't know if they were chasing after him. He thought he might have seen one leap out of the hole. He ran until he couldn't run any further, then he collapsed. Oh, they hadn't come after him. He sat there a while and caught his breath. As he got back to his feet, he thought he noticed something on the ground, maybe 50 yards away. It didn't look like much, maybe just a big rock, but in a land of nothingness, any little thing seems unusual. He slowly walked towards it. The encounter with the lizards had made him very cautious. It turned out to be an empty sack of sunflower seeds. He wondered if it was the same one Magnet had stolen from Mr. Sir, although that didn't seem likely. He turned it inside out and found one seed stuck to the burlap. Lunch. So, we'll leave it there today, see how Stanley gets on tomorrow.